Right? This is lecture 2 of chapter 7. So I'm full of stories today. When I was in sixth grade, um, I ran for cheerleader. I tried out for cheerleader, and I made it. Yay, yay! Partly because everybody knew both my parents were teachers. Everybody knew my parents and knew my name. And partly because I could jump up in the air and land in the splits. So I was a cheerleader. Um, and so seventh grade, I am trying to figure out. Of course, I had been going to camp all summer with these other 5 young ladies, and so seventh grade, is a really odd time. Anyway, you're trying to figure out who you are and who you want to be and who your friends are, and um, so I decided that my identity was going to be cheerleader. Um, and so everybody in our middle school ate lunch at the same time. Rockdale small. We had one middle school. Everybody had lunch at the same time. And the cheerleaders and their friends sat at the front of the lunchroom, right in front of the stage, front of the lunchroom. It was multi-tiered. There were several tables, but you knew that if you had not been invited, you didn't go sit at the cheerleader table. But here I am. I'm sitting at the cheerleader table. Um, and these were some wild little girls. These were some wild girls. So I got invited to the slumber parties where we were tasting drinks that we weren't supposed to be tasting. We were um, taking parents' cars. And they wouldn't let me stay. I told them I didn't want to go, but they wouldn't let me stay. So I just prayed the whole time that we were driving out loud. Because I didn't know. I didn't know what to do. Because these really were not my people, but I'm here and I'm stuck and I'm trying to make this work. Well, one of the cheerleaders broke up with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend decided that he liked this new girl that had moved to town, and the cheerleader didn't like it. So one day, the new girl, who was invited to sit at the table, she comes with her food, and she's walking up to the table. And my friend, the cheerleader, stood up and yelled at her, "You cannot sit at our table anymore." And when I say yelled, it seemed like it just bounced off the walls. The whole room got quiet. The girl froze. I started crying because I was like, "Y'all are mean," and they were like, "Madeline, just shut up." That's why we didn't tell you we were doing this, because you would have told her don't come or something, and I would have. I would have. Um, but that was number one, humiliating. Number two, a demonstration of a lot of power. To have the amount of control where you can decide where people sit and whether or not they can sit at a certain place is a lot of power. So I'm going to talk to you guys about the presiding officers of the Texas legislature. And I promise you, when you look at the dynamic, it is not much different from seventh grade girl politics. The leader of the Senate is not a senator. It is an elected official called the lieutenant governor. Presently, our lieutenant governor is a guy named Dan Patrick, Republican Dan Patrick. He was elected to that position independently of the governor, and his job is to serve in the position of governor if the governor is ever incapacitated, or even if the governor leaves the state for a little bit. He only makes $7,200 though. They have, I think the lieutenant governor has a little apartment in the Capitol. Um, but this person presides over the Senate. So this person is elected in a statewide election. They run as a Democrat or a Republican. So most recently, all of our lieutenant governors have been Republicans since the mid 1990s, or 2000. While the bulk of the job that the lieutenant governor does is in the legislative branch, he is actually a part of the executive branch. But the lieutenant governor gets to decide what committees are going to be, that the Senate is going to have. He gets to decide what type of bills go to each of the committees. The lieutenant governor gets to decide who is going to serve as the chair of each committee, also gets to decide who is the vice chair of each committee. Don't you know that his friends and invitees, and I say his because we've never had a female lieutenant governor, are going to serve in those positions. And not foes or people from the other party even. So the lieutenant governor also serves as the chair of some very important committees, commissions, like the redistricting board is the word I was looking for. So if within their 140 days after a census, the legislature does not get to finish a legislative map, and as you can imagine, that actually happens quite often, then the maps are actually drawn by 5 people, and that is the legislative redistricting board. The lieutenant governor is the chair of the legislative redistricting board. And again, there's only 5 people on it. So you have the lieutenant governor as a chair, the Speaker of the House, who we're about to talk about next, is the vice chair, and then 3 others. I think the Attorney General, the Comptroller, and I don't know who the 5th person is. It's not the governor. It is not the governor. They're also the Legislative Budget Committee that writes the budget and budget priorities for the legislature. The lieutenant governor is the chair of that committee. So the lieutenant governor is actually more powerful than the governor. And in Texas politics, the lieutenant governor is actually the most powerful person in Texas government. A lot of power, and you just do not want to get crossways with the lieutenant governor. He can make your life very, very difficult. We've also not had a female Speaker of the House. Now, the Speaker of the House gets their job a little differently, even more political. So this is the deal. Speaker of the House is just a regular member of the House of Representatives. So you have to get elected in your district, and then on the first day of the legislative session, they have a vote in the House to determine who is going to be the Speaker of the House. It is open. It is not a secret ballot. So the people that are running for Speaker of the House know exactly who voted for them and who did not. Usually they have somebody in mind. That person helps people donates money to them, helps them campaign, gets them elected, does favors for them, and then says, you're going to vote for me, right? Um, so, and then if you don't vote for them, they're sitting there looking right at you. So they know. They know. So the Speaker of the House is a member of the House of Representatives, is elected by other members of the House of Representatives. Um, Only has that 2-year term like other representatives, but this person controls House procedures, appoints all committee chairs and vice chairs, appoints every person to a committee. You have to appeal to the Speaker of the House to get the appointment that you want. Though there is a seniority system, or at least there has been under the last legislative session, there is a seniority system that allows some people to get positions because they have seniority and not because the Speaker of the House put them there. But still, it is a lot of power. When they're having sessions and they're debating, the Speaker of the House theoretically could not recognize you. The Speaker of the House could send your bill to a committee that he knows is going to vote it down or not even look at it. The Speaker of the House controls the amount of time, and its friends control the amount of time that you have debate, whether or not bills can be amended, what office you get, what parking space you get. It's a tremendous amount of power and lots of potential for not letting you sit at the head table if you do something that the Speaker of the House doesn't like. Speaker of the House is the vice chair of all the committees that the lieutenant governor is the chair of. It's a tremendous amount of power. And again, a lot of opportunities for mismanagement, pettiness, vindictiveness. And we have had some speakers of the House that were exactly that. Years ago, we had a Speaker of the House named Tom Craddock. Tom Craddock, he was a booger bear. Republicans didn't like him. And eventually they wanted to check. They were getting ready to have some elections. He didn't like the way that it was going, so he decided that he was not going to allow them to have the election. And he just wasn't recognizing people to speak that he didn't want to hear from. I'll see if I can find that video and drop it for you, where they where they had the coup in the Texas legislature. So what does the legislature do? Well, first and foremost, their biggest responsibility is passing bills. They legislate. So they pass special bills, they pass general bills, they pass local bills, like we're going to name this day Bonnet Day or Mary Smith Day. They also have the Legislative Council, and they also have a budget board that decides what the budget, how much money, how they want to spend different amounts of money, because they do in the legislature have the power of the purse, deciding or allocating money. They also pass resolutions. Resolutions are just declarative sentences or statements about what they things that they like, things that they don't like, things that they hope other people will not do. So they recognize people, they memorialize events, There was, I remember, a resolution where the Texas legislature said we do not like the Affordable Care Act, which is federal legislation, had nothing to do with them, but they just wanted everybody to know that they didn't like it. Resolutions can come out of either house, or sometimes when they want to make a big impact, they will have a joint resolution that is signed by both houses. A concurrent resolution is where it comes out of one house and the other house with by a simple majority says, yeah, us too. So joint resolution comes from both of them. They both sign. A concurrent resolution comes from one house but is agreed to by a majority vote by the other chamber. So what do legislators do? They have to make a decision about how they're going to legislate. Basically, they have a couple of choices. They can say, well, they elected me because they appreciate my judgment and I'm just going to go do what I think is best. Or they can say, I am representing people, so I need to know what they want, and then I'm going to go to Austin and do what my constituents want. Constituents are the people that are in your district that voted for you and that you represent. Constituent. If you are doing what the majority of people in your district want you to do, that is called a delegate. You're not substituting your judgment and saying, well, because they elected me, I'm the best person. You're doing what they want you to do. The other is a trustee. The trustee says, look, I know best. You really don't know. I'm going to make this decision. And we, for the most part, nobody ever likes to admit that they are a trustee type representative unless they have been serving forever. Then they get to the point where it doesn't matter. For the most part, if legislators consistently are voting for things that the members of their district don't like, they end up not getting reelected if people are paying attention at all. And that is a big problem in the state of Texas. A lot of times people have no idea what their legislators are, even who their legislators are. That's why I had y'all do the discussion board the way that it was, because I wanted you to find out who your Texas state representative or senator was. All right. Another thing that the legislature does is bureaucratic oversight. The bureaucracy is the executive branch. Those are the boards and commissions that serve technically under the governor, that are part of the executive branch. So there are a couple of things that the legislature does. It's really, really unusual. The audit committee is not that unusual. So they basically go through and make sure that the money that they have voted to give to certain boards and commissions is being spent the way that they thought, is not being mismanaged. So they do basically a financial audit of the executive branch committees. So this is a check on the executive branch. Sunset Advisory Commission is something that is super unusual. I don't know how many other states do this, but the Sunset Advisory Commission actually does a review every 12 years of every committee that is not mandated by the Texas Constitution, or board or commission that is not mandated by the Texas Constitution. And they look to see how it's going, how you're spending your money, what morale is like, what you have gotten done. They have you do a report as the department where you say, you put your best foot forward, we are great. Now, the sunset part of it is if they don't think that you are serving your purpose, or that you are needed anymore, or that you are efficient enough, they can shut down your committee, your department. Just take it out. So it is as you can imagine, very, very nerve-wracking for the people that are in those departments, because the legislature, and basically who's on the Sunset Advisory Commission, you can already guess. Lieutenant Governor appoints six people, five members of the Senate, and one member at large, and the Speaker of the House appoints six people. So five members of the House of Representatives and one member at large. So 12 people, all of them appointed by the Lieutenant Governor or the Speaker of the House, that are that review and decide whether or not your department is going to be able to continue to exist. I had a friend of mine was telling me that his dad used to work for the Texas Workforce Commission, and he worked there for several years. And each time that they came up for sunset review, they would lay off a whole bunch of people. And so then they would show that they were running this lean machine, and that they were not spending this much money. And so as they were getting ready for their sunset review, they would show a really pared down Texas Workforce Commission. Then they got renewed. Then they would hire all the people back. So that is it's one thing to say you're not doing it right. It's another thing to say you can no longer exist. So just send all your people home. Now, is it common for boards and commissions to get shut down? No, it is not common. Most of the time they're like, you're good, carry on. But just knowing that they do have the power to do it is a tough one. It's a tough one and that's not to say that they never have. They sometimes shut departments down. I wonder certainly we have had a lot less revenue coming into the state. So in general, they are going to be in a where can we cut budgets type mood. So I wonder if there are any departments that are up for sunset review this year. This might not be a good year to be up for sunset review. Another power of the legislature, they do have the power of impeachment. It is very similar to the impeachment power on the federal level, where the House of Representatives indicts. Technically, they get to decide that there has been, or that there's possibly some wrongdoing, and they set out the articles and explain what the issues are. And then they throw it over to the Senate. The Senate has a whole trial, and then they vote, and 60% has to vote to remove a governor from their position, or really any elected official that has not been appointed could be impeached. We have actually had a governor removed from office through the impeachment process. Jim Ferguson was his name. And I'll in chapter 8, I'll tell you what Jim Ferguson did. The Senate, just like in the United States government, has the power to of advice and consent. So anybody that the governor is appointing or wants to nominate for a position, they have to be approved by the Senate. So on top of all the other stuff that they have to do, they have to get people approved. They have to draw districts every 10 years. They have to do sunset review, and they have to get all the legislation through. We are asking a lot of our legislators. So, in the Texas legislature, there are several different types of committees. So first we're going to talk about standing committees. There's two types of standing committees. There's substantive committees. These are the ones that look at bills and decide whether or not the bills will be advanced to everybody. They mark them up. They decide that this doesn't make any sense. We're not going to look at this anymore. That is called pigeonholing. The bill goes to a committee and never comes back out. It's never talked about. You will see that as you're looking on the website. You will see some bills that'll say introduced, assigned to the Transportation Committee, and then nothing. No hearing was ever set up. No vote was ever taken. They just throw it away, technically. That is called pigeonholing. Some of the committees have subcommittees so that they can break up the work and they can decide which bills actually should go to the full committee. So those are substantive committees. Procedural committees decide how things are going to work. They some examples of procedural committees: calendar committee, the rules committee. Calendar committee decides when different pieces of legislation will actually be discussed once they come out of committee. Rules committee decides whether or not bills can be amended from the floor or not. So they set the amount of time, the number of people that can debate the bill. They set the procedure. Those are standing committees. There's also joint committees. Joint committees are composed of senators and representatives, and they usually are appointed to look at a big issue that is going to affect a lot of people, so they get them together and start working on an issue. You also have ad hoc committees. As that sounds, these are put together to address a certain thing for a certain period of time. They are temporary, and the committee breaks up as soon as whatever they've been assigned to do ends. Select committees are also temporary. They are designed to address a particular purpose. Ad hoc committees are usually really quick. Select committees sometimes work on big issues that are going to take a little bit more time, but still, once they finish, then the committee is broken up. And then you have interim committees, and these interim are committees that serve in between legislative sessions. And there's, of course, a lot of time between legislative sessions. So they will get these committees together to study an issue that is going to come up before the next legislature. And so I can give you an example. We were having some issues in the TYC, the Texas Youth Commission, which is our prison system for youth. The issue was that there were several allegations of sexual abuse. And so there were we kept hearing reports in the state of Texas that the youth were being taken advantage of by staffers. And this had gotten to be, there were just several reports. So they decided that they were going to go and study the structure of the Texas Youth Commission and figure out how this kept happening. So they brought in people to testify. They did studies. They looked at books. They looked at the policies. And what they discovered was that when there were incidences, people were not fired. They were allowed to go to another facility. And so it was a handful of people, but they were just operating within the Texas Youth Commission. And so they made recommendations that you have to share information. If certain things, if they happen, you are out and you are not eligible for rehire. And so they restructured TYC and some of its policies based on the study that had been done by the interim committee. And when they came to the legislature, they made those recommendations. That's how an interim committee works. Let's talk about scheduling. It is not as big a deal in the Senate as it is in the House. The House has a lot more people. Scheduling is a much bigger deal. And they vote on rules at the beginning of each session, but these have been pretty consistent. One, no member of the Texas House of Representatives can talk about a bill for longer than 10 minutes. That's their limit. The House Calendars Committee, though, decides when bills will be discussed. Who appoints the members of the House Calendars Committee? The Speaker of the House. If it is a bill that the Speaker of the House does not like, they are going to shove that bill at the end of the 140 days. And they can do that and nobody can do anything about it. So the Calendars Committee has a lot of control. They can also, if it's a big important issue, they will give it a low number. So you see HB1, HB2, they reserve the really low numbers up through 5 or 6 usually for the big important bills, and they talk about those first. Because the Calendars Committee puts them first because they match the policy priorities of the Speaker of the House, the head cheerleader. So the major controversial legislation is controlled by the Speaker and Calendar Committee chair. I just wanted to put in other words what that meant. In the Senate, scheduling is a little different. Rules over the years have basically said this. As soon as a bill makes it through the committee, then that bill goes on the calendar. So a lot of time, what was happening was senators were playing this little game. They would hurry up and pass some really strange legislation in their committee and get it put on the calendar. And it would be about something that nobody wanted to talk about. That is called a blocking bill. So you would put this out and then it would be on the calendar and nobody wanted to talk about that. So there is a way to get around somebody sending this crazy bill out of committee. If you don't want to talk about that one next, then you can request a suspension of the rule. The rule is that you take bills in order. Suspension of the rule, in the last 2 legislative sessions has gone up to a 3/5 vote. You have to have 3/5 of the Texas legislature vote to take another bill out of order. And before that, when I first started teaching, it was always 2/3, but they raised it to 3/5. Um, and so that, so the there may be a Senate calendar committee, but they don't do much because the way that it is designed, the bills just, whatever comes out of committee next, that's the one that's being discussed, unless somebody wants to take one out of order and then they request a suspension of the rule. And if they get a 3/5 vote in the Senate, then they can take a bill out of order. All right. So in those committees, they have looked at a bill, they have marked it up, they've changed the wording, they have had hearings where they have people come and testify, yes, this is great, or no, I don't want it. Anybody can go and testify at a House or Senate hearing. They have to give notice. And once they have looked at the bill, they marked it up, then they, in the committee, vote on whether or not they want everybody to look at this bill. If it gets a majority vote in the committee, then it goes to the floor. The floor is everybody. All 150 members get to look at this and decide whether or not this is actually going to become law. So once the bill goes to the calendar committee gives it a date. The calendar committee, the rules committee decides how long, basically how many people get to talk about it. The speaker appoints people to be floor leaders, and the floor leaders lead the debate. The speaker presides, they have this huge gavel. And then the floor leaders basically recognize people and get the debates going. And so since you don't have a whole bunch of tools at your disposal, one of the things that is very common, and again, you probably would have seen this in the legislative history when you were looking at bills, they would say point of order. What they're doing is saying that somebody has done something wrong. Some rule hasn't been followed. And so they're trying to say, well, we don't need to be debating this bill because you didn't dot your I on page 2. And so you have to stop and address the point of order, vote on whether or not it makes sense or not before you can proceed. So if you are in the minority and you know this bill is probably going to pass, you use points of order to slow it down. Another thing that is very common is that you get together your buddies and you everybody puts their 10 minutes, because remember, members of the House of Representatives have 10-minute limits. They stack together their 10 minutes so that they just keep talking and delay the vote. Most of the time in the House of Representatives, they have these little machines and they vote on the machines. If it's not a huge deal, they will do a roll call. Or sometimes if it is a huge deal, they will do a roll call. But most of the time they use machines and they do the recorded votes, and it shows up on this huge screen. In the Senate, things are slightly different. So number one, the lieutenant governor presides. That's not very different. There's no floor leaders in the Senate. for the most part, they have done all of the work in committee, so they don't debate as much as they do in the House. But they can. They do not have time limits in the Senate. So filibuster is a tool that is used when you want to delay. And we still have filibuster in Texas. It still requires, I think 2/3 of the legislature has to vote to get you to stop. Otherwise, you can talk for as long as you would like, as long as you stay on topic, and as long as you are physically standing. The most recent and most famous filibuster that we've had in modern times was Wendy Davis. About 3 legislative sessions ago, when the legislature was passing HB 2, which was going to have some very strict limits on abortion rights in the state. Wendy Davis talked for 13 hours straight. She put on some tennis shoes. She had a catheter installed so that she didn't have to leave to go relieve herself. And successfully filibustered till the end of a special session, so that they did not have time to vote on the bill. But the governor called another special session. It ended up passing in that session, and then eventually the bill was partly overturned by the United States government as being an undue burden. But that made national news, and Wendy Davis became more of a national name because of her filibuster. It's a big deal to actually have them. Most of the time, they use the filibuster as a tool to say, if you don't change this part of this, then I'm going to filibuster. So they use it as a negotiation tool, the threat of it as a negotiation tool. Every now and then, a bill makes it through the House and the Senate, and it's on the same subject, but they have different provisions in it. If that happens, only one bill can go to the governor, and so the Speaker of the House appoints 5 members. The lieutenant governor appoints 5 members, and they form what is called a conference committee. They get together and compare the 2 bills, see if they can come up with one bill that everybody in both chambers can agree to. So they may strengthen it, they may take stuff out, they may weaken it. Every now and then they get in the conference committee and they can't get it resolved at all, and it just stops there. If they are able to come up with a resolution, they will issue a conference committee report. Then it will go and then back out to the House and the Senate, and they will vote on the conference committee version of this bill. So I have alluded quite a bit to the process of how a bill becomes a law. This is an essay question on the test. This is an essay question that everyone will have. This that we are looking at with these 13 steps is very bare bones. I have talked about a lot more, and the book even talks about more that happens in each stage. This starts with introduction in the House. We know that bills can be introduced in the House or the Senate, but for convenience sake, they decided on this list to start with introduction in the House. There are 2 types of bills that can only be introduced in the House. Otherwise, doesn't matter House or Senate. If it's a House bill, it'll say HB 1292. If it's a Senate bill, it'll be SB 1292. But if it is an appropriations bill, if it has to do with spending money, the Constitution, Texas Constitution, says that those can only be introduced in the House of Representatives. Tax bills, by tradition, are introduced in the House, but that is not in the Constitution. So a bill is introduced, the bill is given a number, then the bill is assigned to a committee. In the committee, what is House committee action? They can mark up the bill, they can pigeonhole the bill, they can have open hearings, take testimony on the bill, they can study it, then they will vote in the committee. That's what committee action is. It's more than just committee action. So I need you to define, what are those steps? What do they do? Mark up, have hearings, vote, and if it gets a majority vote, they issue a report. The report goes to the House Calendars Committee, where the Calendar Committee decides when the bill will be heard. Once the date that the Calendars Committee has given comes up, then it goes to the floor of the House for debate. The Speaker of the House is going to preside. He's going to appoint floor leaders. They're going to have debate. And then they will, where people will be introducing points of order, where they'll be chubbing, where they will talk for their 10 minutes for and against the bill. Sometimes they will amend the bill. That's another tactic that is used. Let's just change this word right here. And then eventually they will vote. Has to get a majority vote. And at that point, just like in the United States legislature, the bill has to go to the other chamber, where it is introduced. It is given a new number. It is assigned to a new committee by if it was introduced in the House, it will go to the Senate and it will be assigned to a committee by the Lieutenant Governor. If it was introduced in the Senate, it will go to the House. It will be given a number and then assigned to a committee by the Speaker of the House. In the Senate committee, they will do the same thing. They can pigeonhole it and put it down. They can take it up, take testimony, mark it up, and vote. And then it will go to the Senate floor in the order that it came up, unless someone asks to suspend the rule and take one out of order. And it does require a 3/5 vote. Not every bill goes to conference committee. Only bills where the House version and the Senate version differ require a conference committee. If they do that, then they mark it up. They issue a conference committee report. It goes back to be voted on by both chambers. If it is approved by both chambers, then it is ready. This bill is ready to go to the governor. The lieutenant governor signs it. The Speaker of the House signs it, and it goes to the governor's desk. Governor has 3 choices. The governor can sign the bill, and now you're a law. Oh yeah. Or the governor can veto the bill. Or the governor cannot sign the bill. Now, what happens in Texas if the governor does not sign a bill? Bottom line, it becomes law without the governor's signature within 10 days. If the governor gets the bill and the legislative session runs out before his or her 10 days is up, then the governor gets 20 days but the governor still has to either sign it or veto it or not sign it. And the governor doesn't sign it, it becomes law anyway. So the governor of Texas does not have pocket veto, has to actually veto the bill. If the bill is vetoed and the legislature is still in session, then it goes back to the House and Senate to see if they can override the bill. If they decide that they're going to override the bill, you have to have a 2/3 vote. That has not changed. 2/3 vote to override a governor's veto. This does not happen very often because most of the time governors only veto bills once the legislative session is out, so that nobody can do anything about it. Greg Abbott, even though he has a Republican majority in the House and Senate, has vetoed quite a few bills. It doesn't seem to affect his popularity. When Rick Perry first became governor, he vetoed quite a few bills, but didn't tell the legislature he was going to veto them. And they were angry with him. Angry with him. So I have filled in some color in between those steps that are outlined here. If you're a chart person, there's the chart. If you are a word person, here are the words. But know that there are A, B, C, D, and E, and F under each of these. And if you don't discuss the contingencies and the other things and the different choices, and then you will not get full credit on the essay question of how a bill becomes a law. All right, that is the end of chapter 7. And email me if you have any questions.